25, folks. You're at the end. There is some important stuff in this chapter. This is one of the chapters you need to review in and of itself. Chapter 24 does a good job of reminding you of everything, but this is one that you really need to pay attention to. Obviously, we only do temporary embalming. Our preservation is not intended to last forever. We should not advertise it as such. So be very careful about how you talk about it. Non-consumer embalming that may look quote-unquote preserved forever includes all the stuff that we really don't want to have to deal with: mummification, desiccation, freeze drying, vulcanization, or dissection, immersion embalming. Major that affected degree and length of preservation: well, condition of the body when we embalmed it, how well we did our job and chemicals we used, and then what did we do to make sure that it stayed good. This simply says that on almost every funeral custom, the deceased body is part of that funeral rite. Some believe in very quick get rid of it. Some believe in long-term. Nat Geo is full of articles on both of those. Our consumers in the United States are more informed. That's why we've gone kind of like the entire spectrum of embalming, no embalming, need for funeral, no need for funeral. Long-term preservation accomplishes a number of goals, and you can see what these are on the slides. Make sure you read them. But a general accepted consensus is that preservation of human remains far surpass the period of the funeral. When we embalm it, it should not be just enough to get us through the funeral. If we've done our job right, it should last, quote unquote, fairly well throughout the front. We have a picture of Padre Pio here. At some point in time, he will cease looking like that and more like a wax sculpture, I promise you that. General concepts is a regurgitation of basic principles, good for review, good to touch up on, okay? So criteria for re-injection, they require re-embalming. Distribution was poor, you didn't actually get enough solution. Concentration was too low and it's not firming or staying preserved. Injected solution was neutralized because of what was going on, and maybe you didn't realize, they had renal failure, or rigor mortis was mistaken for fixation. All of which comes down to you did not do your job well, and you did not do the right things. There is nothing here, with the exception of maybe fluid was not distributed to all areas, that falls in the category of you shouldn't have known that when you did your embalming analysis, because you should be able to see if it was distributed, and everything else falls into you not paying attention to what you're doing. You should know if the concentration is too low. You should be able to do the math. You should look in the tank and see how much you inject, how much do you think came out. Remember, half of what we inject comes out as drainage anyways. So pay close attention to this stuff. 3 methods to re-inject. We break out the needles, or we use surface packs, obviously in order of preference. Time also comes into a factor here. If you don't have the time to strip the body and re-inject it on the table, you might have to opt for one of the other supplemental treatments here. The treatment of the unautopsied body, multi-point injection may be required. So if you decided to one-point it didn't work, you need to go ahead and then multi-point it. It's polite here. He says, oh, this may be because of interruptions of the vasculature, which you created when you stuck them with the trocar. So it's better for you to knock this out ahead of time so you don't have to deal with it again. Reaspirate. First thing you should do is reaspirate, get as much as you can out. Minimal amount of fluid is going to be used, so drainage shouldn't be a big deal for you. You're just going to kind of push in stuff that you actually need in the areas you need it. And then aspirate and re-inject. Aspirate and re-inject. 2 or 3 bottles of concentrated cavity fluid, then reaspirate one last time before you actually dress them. That way you're getting any leftover fluids out. Time is of the essence. You break out the needles. You can do stuff with the hypodermic needles from mouth to fix the face. Cavity fluid is used rather than arterial for purposes in previous chapters. You don't want those active dyes to blotch and cause issues, so you use cavity fluid instead. Eyelids and mouth can easily be treated from the inside, so make sure that you are following some of these things. Go and look at those chapters, treating the autopsy body, unautopsy case, blah, blah, blah. Internal treatments were beaten to death in the autopsy chapter, as well as organ and tissue donation, so I'm not going to regurgitate it here. Delayed viewing. Embalming for delayed viewing or interment can be defined as preparation of remains that will allow the initial viewing up to several weeks after death. This is almost our bread and butter. That is what we do anymore. Common sense reasons why a viewing may be delayed. You should have an idea of what those common sense reasons are. It's important. The choice of arterial fluids and amounts of solution to be injected on everything. Remains, how quick we got them, how long they're in refrigeration. And if you have any doubt how to do this, go back and read chapter 10. And we should pretty much consider everybody is going to be a delayed viewing. And if you've done that every single time, you will be fine. There's a statement regarding Army regulations in regards to preparation of the body. Nothing here should be surprising. They require on every body that goes through. So killed in action, death. Sectional embalming, 2 to 3% solution concentration. We know the 2% is good, 3% is a little bit better, it's a little higher. Equal parts humectant chemical to arterial solution. That would be something fun to try maybe in lab. Thorough aspiration, and then 1 bottle per cavity during cavity injection. So 1 up, 1 down, maybe 1 for the pelvis even. And it tells you over 1 month what some of the recommended solutions are. Looking at this arterial humectant fluid, so that is something like, it says here, Eccles Life Tone, looks like a humectant. Triton 28 with Pierce, Regal with Dodge. 32 ounces co-injection, so that would be your Permaflow or 1 point. 16 ounces water corrective, another 16 ounces of a humectant by itself, and then 32 ounces of warm water to make the reaction happen quicker. Light or intermediate decomp, it just gives you these recommendations you can play with. I'm not going to go into all of them. Excellent results are possible with just straight arterial chemical. You don't have to do much more, but that is you playing with it and knowing what's going on. Make sure you understand how much some of these things dye a body. If you add more dye, you're actually overkilling something. And obviously, anything like this, restricted cervical is your preferred method of injection. Intermittent drainage to keep stuff in there, and delayed aspiration. Refrigeration is not necessary. Cool location is preferred. Basically, a side room of the funeral home that's under air conditioning. You could use your refrigerated morgue. Make sure that you are covering them so that you do not have the morgue freezer fan just blowing all over it. Carefully inspect the body before you put it in, and then check it daily. It gives you the protocols. Plastic on the bottom, body bridges on top of that, cover the remains, basically dress them. Tells you how to make a wetting agent. 2/3 of a gallon of humectant, 4 ounces mold retardant, 1 gallon of water, and then saturate the body. Then reserve the rest in a spray bottle. Loosely cover and then place in the cool area. It says check remains every 3 to 4 days. We've seen previous in the book that you should check it at least once a day. For funeralization purposes. I don't know if there's a disconnect or if this means just for the ones that are put in refrigeration, so be aware of that. That might be an inconsistency. Aspirate or sponge out any liquid, spray the gown or sheeting to keep everything basically moist and fun, and then follow until the day of final viewing. Thoroughly wash and dry so that no evidence of moisture exists, dress and cosmetize. Anatomical embalming, this what you have here is Davor. This is a product being manufactured in Tampa. My buddy Matt Buell of Arkansas State University, he has 2 of these in his embalming labs because he has trouble getting actual cadavers, and they use them for their clinicals. Pretty cool toy. Wish we could get one. It's like 35 grand. Considering that we have bodies, we actually don't need to put that type of money up, but they are fun to play with. So gravity injection is done through large percolators. That's a gravity injector that holds up to 8 gallons of solution, raised to a height of 9 feet above the body. Usually, we will treat this prior to it getting there, so we'll do arterial embalming and then send it up to them. Nothing new here. Some schools drain blood, some don't. There's no aspiration. That's the big thing you take away, that if you are embalming for medical schools, you do not aspirate the body. Okay? Desiccation and mold are the 2 biggest problems that we run into these long-term ones. Shipping of remains, you need to own this chapter. Shipping is a transportation of human remains away from the place of death to another location for final disposition. It can happen via private carrier, operated by funeral home, livery company, or family of the deceased. Shipping out can also be a common carrier, railroad, or airplane. Conservative estimates is about 20,000 are shipped every year. Shipping can be divided into three broad categories. Know what these are. Intrastate, between cities and within the state, throughout Florida, for instance. Interstate, between Florida and any other state. And international, between us and any other country. Canada, Mexico, islands of the Caribbean, etc. Intrastate is the one we like. Least problems, get a permit, we're on our way. General rule is that all remains transported by common carry must be accompanied by a burial transit permit or its equivalent. And that is a fairly accurate rule. Bodies do not go anywhere without the permit. In some states, local jurisdiction at the place of death may impose requirements, death certificate be present, etc. You will know what those are in the states you will practice. From a legal standpoint, all the same criteria for release of the remains from the location of death must be met. Written authorization from next of kin, etc. If the next of kin has not authorized the release, you shouldn't even have a burial transit permit because you shouldn't have custody of the body at that point. If a funeral home embalmed remains and it was not authorized by the person in charge of disposition, no charge can be made for embalming. We're going to beat this into you in funeral law, and there are criteria for that because this is a simplification. There are that you can get that, but requires you to do something. But this is not incorrect. If you simply had the people there and you neglected to get permission, you then cannot charge for it. Regardless of the type of shipment or carrier, certain rules apply for preparation. Rules are good industry practice, but some may be required by law or even higher standard may be required. And it talks about the stuff that we should be doing anyways. The big clicker here that you need to take away is that when shipping by common carrier, place a shrouded body on a sheet of plastic that can envelop the body. Most common carrier combination containers will actually have the sheeting already at the bottom. That's to prevent any dripping, excuse me. And do not place one hand over another. This might not be the desired position of the people, the locale of where you're shipping the body to. It also might cause problems with the straps if they're over the flesh and then they bite in and forms a line. When shipping casketed remains, place a very heavy layer of cotton around the head and face to protect the casket and clothing from any purge. Well, yeah, it's in a casket, so you're going to do everything in your power to make sure it don't leak and trash the casket, because that'll be on you. Secure the body if shipping within a combination container. Strap the body down if you can. You might be able to get some casket straps or something like that. Lower the bed of the casket to the lowest position and move the feet to the furthest end. Secure the head so it will not slide. So basically you want the body immobile. Document the condition of the body. Send copies of those reports. Notify the receiving funeral director of any problems with the body. You might want to give them the heads up before you even ship the body. Say, hey, just letting you know we're going to do our best, but here's the problem. Especially if the family is up north or at the receiving end, they need to know and have a realistic expectation of what's going on with the body. Interstate and interstate shipping regs will usually be set by a governmental agency in the state where the death occurs. There is no universal registry for death certificates or anything. It just kind of is what it is. Be sure to comply with the regulations of all the states. So, for instance, you might be in a state, and I'm just going to throw one out there. I don't know if this is true or not, but we'll say for the sake of argument, you're transporting a body to South Carolina. You necessarily have to drive to Georgia. Well, if there's a law in Georgia that says only a licensed Georgia funeral director can transport dead bodies within the state, you do not have a Georgia license. So as soon as you get to the Georgia border, you might have a problem. So you might have to contact the funeral director to actually do the run for you. Know those type of complications. You don't want to get caught with something like that. After September 11th, the Transportation Security Administration was formed, and they put into practice the known shipper program. All human remains have to be screened prior to placement on an aircraft. This usually means for us we drop them off fairly early in the day so that there is no problem getting them on the plane. Tells you about the ways they go ahead and they screen. X-rays and odors. Odor identifier has been found to be triggered by formaldehyde. Any human remains sets off an alarm could be quarantined. An approved certified cargo screening facility can inspect shipments, resolve an alarm issue, and you can actually, as a funeral home, be certified as a CCF. But that is an important distinction, that you must be a known shipper no matter what to ship a body. Whether or not you are a CCSF, a certified cargo screening facility, is irrelevant. If you are not a known shipper, you most certainly will not be a certified cargo screening facility. And you need to be a known shipper for any airline you transport with. So if you ship via Northwest and then someone says, hey, can you ship Spirit because Spirit flies into my local airport? Unless you're a known shipper with Spirit, you cannot ship via Spirit. You might want to get on the horn with them and find out what it takes to become one. Obviously, if the remains trigger an alarm on the matter until they resolve it, so you're going to have delays. Give yourself time. For intrastate and interstate shipping of cremated remains, okay, the United States Post Office is the only legal available. UPS, FedEx, EMS, any of those guys will not knowingly accept cremated remains directly because they cannot insure it. They have no insurable value. The U.S. Post Office will declare a limit when you ship cremated, which is why you have to declare it. And the only two ways you can ship cremated remains through the Postal Service is express mail, which is what I highly recommend, or registered. Severely discourage you from using. Majority of airlines will also accept cremated remains for shipment, either as checked or on-board carry-on luggage. If it's going to go on for carry-on, it needs to be in an X-ray approved container. So the temporary container, the plastic urn you see here, the cardboard box or whatever, all of those work. You're actually supposed to have all three. Cardboard on the outside just as a general container, the plastic holding the actual cremated remains, inside the temporary plastic urn for transport. You can also use things like wood. Wooden urns will go through. But metal urns, stone urns, I would refrain from using those. If you're going to bring those with you, you should transport those separate from the remains. Have the urns open for the airport TSA people to inspect, and then have the cremated remains in the transport container or go to the X-ray machine. Then have a funeral home put the cremated remains in the urn at the location. I strongly discourage you to recommend the families they should ever put urns or anything like that in their checked luggage. They do not need to have those things out of their possession. Take it on the plane. Review the responsibilities for shipping and receiving funeral establishments. This is going to be very important for you, and you can make a pretty good business being a shipper. There are two types of containers, okay? Combination case. The book calls this a combination air tray, which is not the proper terminology. A combination case is an all-wood-based container that has sides, ends, and inside top all made of wood or fiberboard with an exterior covering of cardboard. Now, I have seen cardboard versions only of this with a little bit of particle board inside. Understand, know this definition, and know how this differentiates from an alternative container or a combination unit. That would be important. An air tray. Air trays are used for casketed remains. Only the base is made of wood. Sides and top are usually of heavy 5-ply, I think it is, corrugated cardboard. It's thicker than a refrigerator box. Both containers are common to the U.S. and Great Britain. They come in a variety of sizes. Both of them are one-use items. You do not recycle them. You may have to advise the airline of the outer dimension of the container, but this is very uncommon because they're typically made to certain specifications that are fairly standard in the airline's agency. Some foreign countries require the railroad box, the all-wooden box. You picture of it here. Cannot stress to you enough. Contact a firm that actually does this. There's one out of Miami. I think it's called Pearson. They should be the people you call for shipping anything outside of the United States. If you are not using them, you assume the liability and the risk of having a problem. Definitely look at the consulates and get the information that you need in regards to starting the process so that you can educate your families, but then definitely call Pearson and make sure that you're doing everything you needed to do. They will tell you what to do. In almost all countries today, permission must be granted to repatriate human remains or even cremated remains. Smaller countries may only have one embassy in the U.S. Some larger countries might have them throughout the U.S. So you might have to do some searching to find out which one it is. There are countries that have no diplomatic relations with and require you to go through other countries, which can be problematic. Again, work with a person that specializes in shipping like Pearson. Remains cannot be shipped when we are at war with a country. That is your takeaway. Consular jurisdiction might request documentation, including translated death certificates. You might have to go through and pay for someone to translate it. You might have to, well, you're definitely going to have to get death certificate with an apostille on it, which is a seal from the State Department of Florida. Inevitably, there are going to be costs for shipping anything outside of the United States, and you will need more paperwork than you would normally need. And it goes into this. And some of these things we don't have in the state of Florida. Embalmer's affidavit, you might actually have to create one to do this. Other states, they have that. In some states, the embalmer's affidavit is part of the death certificate, where the body is embalmed or unembalmed. And understand it, everyone's going to want their cut. So there are going to be probably some fees. Just you have to advise the family, and they have to pay, or it doesn't happen. Talks about Ziegler cases. Sometimes they want them sealed within a metal container and have that placed inside of a casket. You're going to have to do anything they want. So these are some of those exceptions where countries go above and beyond to make your life a little miserable. Shipment of unembalmed remains. It is possible to ship unembalmed remains. Typically, you can use dry ice. My recommendation is run down and buy some freezer packs from the dollar store. Freeze those things and throw them in with the body. I've seen a lot of people say that works the best for them. Do whatever you want. And cost of shipping by airline is by weight, pounds or kilograms. And there are limits to how much you can ship. So if you have an extremely morbidly obese person that's going in a casket, they're like 500 or 600 pounds, another 200 pounds for the casket. They're never going to get on a plane. Shipping must be paid for at the time it's dropped off at the cargo area. Again, that is an oversimplification. You may pay for it as the shipping agency, or the person receiving it may pay for it. If the receiver is going to pay for it, you will sign an affidavit that you are responsible for the fees. So you should hope and be ready to go ahead and go after someone if they do not pay that bill. So you might want to get a signed statement of goods from that funeral home. The airline gets paid one way or another. If you don't pay the bill, they will take you off a ship list. You will simply not be able to ship bodies until you satisfy the bill. So paying your airline is probably a good idea, and you don't have an excuse. You should have collected that from the family at a bare minimum. If family can't afford to pay for the air freight, you shouldn't be shipping. There are some people who require you to come and inspect the container and then put a wax seal saying it's shipped. You will be responsible for collecting those fees for that consulate. And if they say you have to pay mileage and then overnight stay and whatever, advise the family. You should know that because you contacted the consulate prior to putting the family what the costs might be. If you don't know and you can't get a quick answer, tell them that you need to figure that out, and that will be added, and write that right on your statement of goods. When a family walks out, you can have that little commentary on there that these prices do not include consulate fees, which will be included once consulate confirms what the costs are. That is fair, but you still have to get that document signed under Florida law when you finish the arrangement conference. They need to have it when they walk out. Document. That's what is basically going on. Communicate that. And make sure that you are speaking with probably a licensed director, not some unlicensed answering service or their cousin who answers the phone. You want to be able to talk shop with someone who knows what you're talking about. Document every phone call. You should have a phone log that you keep with that file. Write it on the inside of the folder. I used to keep a separate piece of paper that documented all my phone calls regarding a case so that there would be no doubt when a phone call took place and who I was speaking to. And obviously, send copies of your embalming reports. Talks about using a combo. Make sure you put a plastic sheet on the bottom. Most of them already have that in place. It comes up a couple inches on each side. But understand, if you buy the cheapo version, put the plastic in there. Tie stuff down. Use styrofoam head blocks. I've seen some people tape together some empty fluid bottles and use that as a pillow. You might want to keep some pillows off of a knockdown that you used for a cremation. I do not advise you to take pillows out of cremation containers just for this purpose, because then you're defrauding the family that purchased it. But if you do have some knockdowns you couldn't use, they fractured, etc., keep some of those things for use in situations like this. Whenever you are shipping, okay, the restorative and cosmetic treatment is the responsibility of the receiving funeral home. They're going to be the ones responsible for dressing, etc. Now, obviously, this means it's not going in a casket, because if it was going in a casket and you had the clothing, you would be the person responsible. So use common sense when looking at it. If you are having a viewing down here, you are responsible for the restoration and cosmetic treatment. But if you're just shipping a body out to somewhere else, it is your goal to prepare it, embalm it, and get it gone. The lid of a combination case should be nailed or screwed in place. Head end should be clearly marked. This is usually done by the manufacturer. And your funeral home will teach you the protocols they want you to take in regards to what you write on the case, the documentation you include inside, copies on the outside, all that sort of stuff. It says that ensure legal documents are placed in a sealed envelope on top of the container. I highly recommend you put the originals inside, maybe taped to the casket lid or to the plastic or something. Under no circumstances do you put the originals probably on the outside unless you are obligated by law to do so. In case something happens, you don't have any more, you don't have any backups. You lost it. So generally anything on top, you see the red arrow pointing to the sealed area, that's what you should use. That's what you should use. And generally, shipping containers will come with the pockets you use to put that stuff on there. Generally, what you're going to put on the outside of the container is name of the deceased, receiving funeral home address and phone number, transportation, all flights involved, the entire shipping itinerary. Obviously, protect everything around you with plastic. Pillows should be turned upside down, placed in a garbage bag. Cover everything you can in plastic. I mean, realistically, almost wish you could cover the body in plastic, but it is what it is. Cover the face and hands to prevent makeup from touching anything. That you can cover in plastic, and I would recommend maybe taking a inexpensive 13-gallon garbage bag, cutting it down the edges and forming some little cheapy plastic sheets, and then wrapping with that so that nothing comes in contact anywhere else. If it has a gasket, don't seal it. Okay. If you have a gasketed casket, do not crank it all the way down. Now, you can crank it enough so that it's locked into place and it does not rattle, but there's still a little bit of space for it to come up and down. It's also important to leave the cap off the end. One of the caps is for the crank. You can raise the bed. The other one is for the pressure release. It goes right into the interior. Typically, you'll take that completely off, put it in an envelope, and then tape it either on the top of the casket, or what I used to do is put it in an envelope, wrap it around one of the bars they handle and staple it in place so it didn't go anywhere, so you didn't have to go into the casket to find it. Whatever it is, moral of the story is that you do not seal the casket if it has a gasket, because that could cause a problem. It says here that you might want to throw in a crank that's unique to that particular casket. That's gone the way of the dodo bird for the most part. Everyone uses the same size hex wrench. It just kind of is what it is. Under a best case scenario, the receiving funeral home only has to do a little bit of touch up and it's on its way. That is your goal. So general suggestions you are receiving: inspect the remains as soon as possible. You might not want to unbox it the night of, but you definitely want to unbox it the morning of your day shift. So if you're receiving a body on a Friday night, you're not open on Saturday, you should still go on Saturday morning, unbox it, and take a peek-see. Document irregularities or problems. Photograph if you have to. It is what it is. For minor inconveniences, you don't really have to call the family. Call the funeral home to try to work things out. But if you do have to charge for something, you definitely want to let the family know. It is what it is. With extensive problems, you better consult with the family, discuss it, who's going to deal with whatever problems may have arisen, especially if you get stiffed on the shipping bill. Document everything on your own embalming reports. So yeah, you received them, you got the reports from those people that came in, and now you have your embalming report, your analysis of how you received it, and anything else you've had to do. That's important, okay? Book indicates you have 2 embalming reports. So in this case, he separates further. One specifically to document the condition of the body, okay? And another explaining the treatments and condition after you did it, so they cannot be confused. You do not want a court to be confused. I have not covered the preparation and shipping and process in detail. Read this on your own time. It's fairly straightforward, not something you need me to bark at you. You will do more of this, obviously, when you are actually in professional practice. And that's it, folks. Congratulations. You've completed Embalming 2. Make sure you go back. You stay on your A game. This is one of the most important subjects that you will encounter on your national board exam. And best of luck in all your future endeavors.